Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be doing our first tier list post Dynasty release, and it's going to be a lot to talk about, but shouldn't be too long of a video because honestly it doesn't seem like Dynasty made any kind of major shakeups in the meta, and I could be doing a completely wrong call here, could be just showing up completely at the next major event, but compared to previous sets we've seen come out, bringing in stuff, a pretty powerful hero every set like Starvo, stuff like Briar. Most sets having Phi, for example, and Icelander, both from the most recent set. Even Dromai is pretty good. I don't see any huge changes from Dynasty overall. So if you want to close out of the video here, you can. But there are going to be some changes in the tier list, and we'll talk a bit about what heroes maybe did actually get some bonus points, or some heroes didn't, and then also maybe some lessons learned from Worlds, right? I haven't put out a tier list since Worlds happened, and there might be some changes just based off the data we got from that event. So let's start off with S tier. Usually in Flesh and Blood, there's either one really good hero or like two or three. There's usually never more than like four or five. And sometimes if the meta is really healthy, there's basically kind of no real S tier heroes. And I'd say right now we're in that kind of area where there's a few really good heroes, and I wouldn't call them quite S tier. It's more like A+, right? And our A+ heroes are the two really good aggro decks, which is Phi and Briar here. And then we've got Icelander as well. And I'd say these are kind of the top three decks. Oldhim, I think, is maybe not as good as these three. He saw a lot of play, but didn't actually end up converting as much as he wanted. And there's kind of too many auto losses for Oldhim. And none of these three heroes have auto losses in that same way, right? And Oldhim can auto lose to Control Dash or Dromai. And these three heroes, even Icelander can beat a Dromai. So not really any auto losses for these three heroes. And they're definitely the three strongest right now. I don't think Dynasty changed that. None of these heroes really got anything from Dynasty per se. I really enjoy Briar, so I've been messing around with a Cashin, Crown of Dominion or Domination, that new legendary crown. I've been messing around with those two in Briar, and seeing how that's working. No kind of concrete results yet, but if I really like the list, I'll definitely make a deck tech for it. But nothing major change-wise to these heroes, but that's kind of how it is. Like the set didn't have a ton of power cards. Like overall, the power was pretty low for this set, and I think they were just wanting to play it maybe a little safe, but it was definitely lower on the power side here overall. And I think these three heroes kind of were the top three coming out of Worlds and stay the top three post Dynasty. Now let's talk about A tier. We've got Oldhim. I think he's kind of on the cusp there. He's quite strong. Also didn't really get anything from Dynasty. Actually probably lost a bit from Dynasty, because I think Dash got a bit better here. She got a really good Majestic. I think it's called Harpoon Gun. I don't know. It's a 1-for-4 attack where you take a card from your opponent's hand and put it on the chain blocking, which is really good disruption. Basically lets you just take your opponent's strongest card, especially against aggro decks that want to keep all of their cards against Dash. Lets her have some solid disruption that she didn't really have before, especially on mech cards that traditionally don't really have any disruption. So that's pretty nice for her. BIOS update, not even a bad Majestic, and some people are even messing around with the kind of construct OTK game plan where you play high octane, make a bunch of action points, and then attack for like 30 with your construct. So Dash got some good tools, and I think she was already maybe a high B tier hero, and now I'm gonna say A tier is where we'll keep her for now. I think she's quite powerful. I think A tier is actually pretty open. There's quite a few heroes that I think are all quite strong and probably deserve to be an A tier. The other wizard, Kano, you saw some of the players from the Arsenal Pass team brought him to Worlds and got pretty decent success with him. Kano is always going to be a player in the meta as long as people don't have a bunch of Spell Void. He's able to win. And I do think there's a kind of new interesting Brainstorm Kano deck that could possibly, have some legs to it. It might be awful, but I think it could be pretty cool. And I like that he has a finisher now. is another option to him. So we'll put Kano in A tier, and we'll also put Rhinar, who actually won the calling and had there's two Rhinars in the top 8 of that calling, right? So Rhinar obviously doing some good stuff, and that deck did get maybe 3 new cards, not a ton of new cards, but I think Skullcrack, which is the card where when you randomly discard it, you gain a resource. I think Skullcrack is probably being added into that deck. If you want to see the deck tech for that calling winning deck, I definitely recommend checking out Arsenal Pass's channel. Chandler Toe, who won the calling, did a really good deck tech that I thought was very detailed on their channel. So I recommend checking that out. And I think Reinhardt's quite powerful. He loses a bit to these 2 aggro decks here, the Fi and the Briar. He has some trouble into, but then he has pretty decent game into everything else, into the Icelander, the Oldhim, Dash. I mean, basically everything else I put on this list, as long as it's not an aggro deck. So basically the 2 ninjas and the 2 rune blades are pretty rough for him, but I think he probably has some decent legs into most of the rest of the field. So pretty solid hero, and as long as you can only hit 1 or 2 aggro decks, and even then you can still high roll them a little. I think he's in a solid spot. We're also going to throw in Lexi here. I think we'll throw in 2 more, actually. We'll do Lexi and Dromai. Like I said, pretty chunky A tier here. I think this meta is quite healthy. I'm actually glad that Dynasty didn't make any major changes, just because I think this meta was really healthy. A lot of people, if you asked almost anyone that competed in Worlds, they would probably tell you this is the best CC meta we've ever had, or at least one of them, and I would agree. I mean, I really think this CC meta was quite healthy, and so I'm glad it seems pretty healthy. Like, I think you could win a calling with almost any hero right now. This meta is really, really beneficial to people that are kind of one tricks in a way. Like, if you really know your hero, you really know every matchup and how it should play out and the game plan for every matchup. I think you could almost play any hero right now. There's a few, I mean, maybe Bolton or Leviah might be a bit harder. But overall, you could play almost any hero and win a major event, or at least top 8 it, if you just really know your hero inside and out. So it's definitely a meta that is so open that it really just pays off to know your hero super well and have hundreds of games on them, right? But speaking to these last 2 I added on, I think Dromai is already in a great spot. She has kind of similar almost situation to Rhinar, where she loses to the aggro decks, Fi, the Katsu, and the Rune Blades, and then she really beats up on everyone else. So she'll beat up on Icelander, on Oldhim, on Dash, Kano. She'll beat up on a lot of the rest of the field and just doesn't want to hit these aggro decks. So kind of similar plan there. But she's quite strong, and just like Rhinar, she can sometimes high roll these aggro decks. She gets Tomotai against the Fi. She just gets a bunch of dragons out against the Rune Blade that they can't deal with. So she definitely has a pretty solid plan, and I think she could still be a good force in the meta. And then last we've got Ranger here. I'll also I guess is my crazy placement for this tier list, because Azalea is usually down here in D tier. But yeah, Ranger, I think, got some really good cards. I think they got a card called Heat Seeker, which effectively draws them a card. I think when it hits, it puts a card like face down in their arsenal from the top of their deck. Some of the aim cards are quite good. I think there's an aim card that destroys opponent's arsenal. So some really powerful Majestics Ranger got. And overall, I think it's enough that they were already pretty close to being a great deck. And in this set that was pretty low power, if you're getting just a few powerful cards, a few good Majestics, that might just push you over the edge, because a lot of decks, like these top 3 decks, basically got nothing. So, getting a little extra tools and extra kind of snatch on an arrow effect and CNC on an arrow effect, these could be enough to make these decks good enough and competitive. So I already thought Azalea was maybe a little underrated from what I was rating her before. Azalea, even without any changes, had a pretty amazing matchup into aggro decks. Just being able to loop Red in the Ledger, which your whole game plan is you just pump it up, you make it as big as possible, and then you attack them with it. It hits them because it's dominated and they're an aggro deck that can't block well. and then they only can take one action, right? So all they can do is attack you for like, I don't know, maybe at most like 6, but usually they're going to attack you for like 4 or 5 as their only action. And then you just repeat that, and over again, you will win by a mile as Azalea, especially against Phys, which are a pretty solid amount of the meta, and against these Briars and stuff. So she does struggle into the Icelander and the Oldhams of the world. Ranger does not like to play against ice decks very much, but I think maybe some of these new tools could help. I mean, a nice draw card on hit from your arrows basically is really good, and destroying Arsenal is nice as well. So yeah, Ranger getting a decent boost, and I'm excited. Excuse me, I'm excited to see where Ranger goes from here. I think Azalea especially could have a place in the meta, being able to stop these go wide decks with Red and Ledger loops, and might be something that we have to keep an eye out for. I know in Azalea top 8'd like a Battle Harden or something, and that wasn't really a huge surprise to me. I think that actually makes sense. Another hero, I should say, that probably got a decent boost is Katsu. I know a lot of people are playing, I guess they're calling it Katsu, because you're using Crouching Tigers. And I think that maybe is a solid deck. I haven't, seen any, obviously there's no tournament results for it or anything. And I haven't play tested with it too much. But it does seem like, you can get some crazy 40 plus damage turns, going super wide, making, using like Art of War and Roaring Tiger and a bunch of these buffs to make your Crouching Tiger each come in for like 1 million a piece, and then end with a Salt the Wound after they weren't able to block out your whole turn. I definitely think, there's some legs there, and Katsu could be, an actual deck that is going to be playing its game here. Unfortunately, it is just worse than Phi when it's playing into these ice decks. And so overall, there's not a ton of reason to play Katsu over Phi, but if you enjoy playing a little bit more of a dark horse hero, I think he's worth picking up. Similarly, Viserai, I think, is just the worst Runeblade compared to Briar. But I've seen some people playing this new Runechant OTK build, and that's probably pretty bad. But once again, it has a different axis, right? This Runechant OTK might surprise an Oldham. We're able to beat them by making 60 Runechants and then killing them. But I do think in general, just the Mauve Shrill Rosetta game plan is not bad for Viserai, and I definitely think he's another hero that you could take down an event if you really know the deck well. And so I still think he's quite powerful. And honestly, all of these heroes from B tier and up, I could see you at least top 8ing a Calling or something like that with. The meta's just super open and really rewards knowing your deck and knowing your hero. We're gonna round it out with kind of the last two I haven't talked about, the Dory and the Bravo. Neither got any kind of major tools as far as I can tell from Dynasty. They're kind of in their same place. They're just not the best option. There's a better Guardian. There's just better things to be playing than these two. But they can both sometimes beat the aggro decks. Dory blocks really well and has a threatening on hit on her sword. Bravo has Crippling Crush and Spinal Crush dominated. So these decks can win games, but I just think there's better options than them currently, and I do wish they had maybe gotten some more tools from Dynasty itself. I can understand not printing any new Guardian cards for Bravo, but maybe some good Warrior cards would have been nice for Dorinthia. And then at the end here, obviously we don't have Prism, but we do have Levia and Bolton, and I don't really think there's any D tier heroes. I did try playing some Bolton after he got his new legendary, but one card doesn't really turn the deck around too much, and he still just loses to ice way too much. And yeah, he still can beat aggro doing his OTK. He still can lose to ice, and it doesn't. One card is nice, and I guess it gives you some blizzard prevention if you really go late, but he still doesn't have all the tools he needs. Levia, I think Reinhardt's probably in a better spot. I did try doing a kind of mid-range Levia deck as well, just trying out and seeing if I can make these heroes work that are at the bottom, and it's not bad per se, but especially with Arachne running around now, it is just really hard to play Levia where they're just going to give you a bunch of blood debt. And speaking of, I almost forgot about Arachne. We'll say this Prism is Arachne here. I will actually put Arachne kind of top of C tier, bottom of B tier in this range. I think he's not super solved. We'll say this Prism is Arachne, and I don't think he's solved enough yet. But his biggest problem is he just has really low damage output compared to what these other decks can be doing. He has much lower damage output than Fire Briar, and he has less control tools than these ice decks like Oldhim and Icelander. And you need to be doing one or the other. You either need to be a setup deck, like what Pistol Dash can do, I should say, or what Dramai can do. You need to be a really good disruptive deck, like these ice decks that have Channel Link Frigid and Blizzard, or you need to output just a ton of damage, like Art of War with Fi or Channel Mount Heroic with Briar, right? All three of those are viable options. You can see kind of I'll put these top 6 decks here. We have 2 aggro decks, 2 disruptive decks, and 2 setup decks. All solid strategies. And Arachne, this Prism doesn't really do any of it. If I had to put him in anything, he's a disruptive deck, right? He has Surgical Extraction. He has Leave No Witnesses. But they don't have Go Again. They're decent, but it's not like his weapon's disruptive. He doesn't have a Winter's Wail. He's just lacking some of the disruption that he needs to be a full disruption deck. If your opponent is able to effectively block out, I know he has a lot of reactions, but if they can block out, it's really hard for him to give Go Again. So he kind of gets... he just gets outvalued by Icelander. He gets killed too quickly because he can't disrupt the aggro decks. He can get blocked out by Oldhim. And if he really loses to these setup decks, I mean, he can't outrace this Pistol Dash before it sets up. So, and Icelander can go Frost Hex combo against him if they really want to. So I'm not really sure where Arachne's place is right now. I think he's fun. He's pretty cool. I like what they're trying to do with Arachne, but he's missing a little bit of that power. If he had any kind of attacks with Go Again, where he didn't need to use his boots or didn't need to Razor Reflex or something, if he had some assassin attacks, I'm saying specifically with Go Again, he might be like higher up in B tier. But as it is, if you're trying to Go Again, you have to use Razor, you have to actually have it connect and use your boots, or you have to play cards like Scar for a Scar that just aren't assassin cards. So he's just lacking a little in the damage front and doesn't have all the disruption he needs. So I'm going to put him kind of somewhere high C, low B tier maybe. I don't want to put an exact spot on him yet, but that's kind of where I'd say Arachne is. I mean, he's a really interesting hero, but I think the main thing, in my opinion at least, is that his weapon is just such low damage output. I mean, the rate of 2 resources for 1 damage, if you watched my last video about points of value, that's awful, right? Like, you want to be paying like at least Winter's Wail, where you're paying 3 resources for 4 damage. He has to pay 4 resources for 2 damage, so you're paying 1 more resource than Winter's Wail for 2 less damage. If his weapon was better, if it only cost 1 to attack with, if it attacked for 2, something like that, I could see him maybe being a bit better. But as is, you almost like never really want to attack with your weapon unless you're just have a bunch of extra resources in hand, and then even then I think it's just inefficient. So I mean, don't love that. Wish he had a better weapon there. But overall, this is kind of where the meta is. Really happy. It looks pretty healthy to me. I mean, I really think you could play almost any hero right now and do pretty well. No major events until January of next year, where we have ProQuest Season 3, and then the Pro Tour for that will be in North America, so hopefully I'll be able to go to that. If you're in the Jacksonville area or anywhere near Florida, we do have one of my sponsors, Java Game House, is doing a 1K in Jacksonville. It is in December. Let me see if I can get the exact date for that. It is December 10th at 1 p.m. And so we're going to be doing a 1K if we get 32 people. If we get more, it could be like a 2K or a 3K. And that's in Jacksonville on December 10th. So kind of I'll be live streaming it. I don't think I'm going to play. I think I'm going to live stream the event. So keep an eye out for that too. I'll probably just live stream it either to my channel or to Java Game House's channel, something like that. But yeah, come out to that if you can. Super excited for that 1K and excited to see kind of what people brew up for this Dynasty meta, because I have this idea of it that I'm showing you right here, but I'd love to be completely wrong. I always like being surprised. So yeah, come check it out. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you next time.